And we're back. All right. Hey, welcome back to the Build Beyond podcast. This episode is going to be dedicated to, I guess the first word that just came to my mind was religion, but I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I'm specifically talking about Christianity. I've been on a bit of a faith journey, and it's parallel to my journey as a healthcare provider. And it's gotten to the point where they're not separate anymore. It's combined. And that doesn't mean that I work exclusively with Christians or with any people of faith. To be fair, faith doesn't really, it's not even really something I talk about with patients. I'm kind of conflicted. Maybe I should talk more about it. I guess I use the podcast as a way of getting these thoughts out. I am, as a healthcare provider, constantly thinking about health. So physical health. Specifically, I'm a chiropractor, so I think most people, they're going to stereotype what I do as pain management. And I do a lot of pain management. Another stereotype is just, I'm cracking backs, which if you're a regular listener of this podcast, or you're on my social media, or you've worked with me, I don't do a lot of hands-on therapy. I use it from time to time, but I am, as a healthcare provider, primarily concerned with the health of my patients. I don't really care if you have knee pain, if you might have diabetes also, and we haven't figured that out, or if you've got heart problems or things like that. And there's a lot of people with a lot of health problems, and they're not always well managed. There's a lot of reasons for that. So I think when I am assessing someone, I can define physical health. But how do we define spiritual health? I did a podcast with Aaron Peterson previously. I can't remember. It was maybe about 6 months ago now. And Aaron is the Dean of Men at Hillsdale College, but he's also a Catholic deacon. I am Catholic, so we go to the same church. Aaron helped officiate my wedding. So that is to say, we know each other quite well. And that was a long episode. If you haven't listened to it and this topic interests you, I encourage you to check that one out. I'll link it in the show notes. That was about 3 hours long. We talked a lot. I cried a little bit. I mean, it's an intense subject, and I feel like as you are getting closer to God and feeling like you're developing that relationship, you start to feel a lot of stuff that you don't normally feel. So I think that would be a good listen if you're curious about this topic. But I brought Aaron on because I wanted to know, how do we define spiritual health? What was his opinion? Because I can tell you what I think of physical health. There are a lot of definitions out there. One of the more common ones comes from the World Health Organization. And, it's talking about, having mental health and physical health and social health. And this definition was criticized because it used the word complete. And, to have complete physical, mental, and social health is hard to do. So for example, if you got type 1 diabetes as an infant, you can't be definitively healthy under that definition. But there's an article, an opinion piece that I talk about with my college students, and I brought it up on the other podcast. I've probably brought it up on several of these podcasts, where they talk about the definition of health, and they suggest that we include the ability to adapt and to self-manage, because you could have a lot of stuff going on with you, maybe even a lot of stuff wrong with you. But if you're able to adapt and to self-manage and to keep moving, regardless of the illness or the injury, then we could say, like, you're a healthy person. It's kind of broad, but we can narrow it down and we can start to measure things. So we can look at blood pressure, we can look at pulse, we can look at breathing rate, we can look at height and weight, BMI, we can look at body temperature, we can look at step count, we can look at heart rate variability, we can look at cholesterol numbers, we can look at blood sugar, we can look at, there's so many metrics for health. And we don't necessarily have to agree on the perfect battery of tests to define someone as healthy, but we can define it however we want to define health. This idea of physical health, we can put it in a box. But how do you do that with spiritual health? So that's one question A, right? So we've defined physical health. How do we define spiritual health? And then once we've defined spiritual health, how do we connect the two? And where do they overlap? And can you actually be an overall healthy person without spiritual health? Obviously, I'm biased. I'm going to say no. There are a lot of people who would disagree with that. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. But can you be spiritually healthy without physical health? And I think you could, and I'm not trying to say one way or the other, but these are things that cross my mind. And while there are a lot of people out there who have maybe a great relationship with God who are not physically healthy, I think it probably it's probably important why you're not physically healthy. Is it because you just have bad luck, or it's just things happen, or is it because you're not trying? And that sounds kind of harsh, but I like the idea of having these podcast episodes because it gives me a venue to talk about these things and to think out loud, and to do it in somewhat of a judgment-free zone. Although I'm very well aware that this is going to go live and that people could judge me for it, and that's okay. I'm open to that. But I want to find an answer. Now, I think what usually comes to mind when I start thinking about this is I'm not good at quoting the Bible, but there's a parable about talents. And if you read the Bible, you know what I'm talking about. But for those who don't know, Jesus spoke in parables, and I'm not going to say this one well, but essentially there's a wealthy landowner, and he's going to take off for some period of time. And he decides to divide up some of his fortune among his servants. And he doesn't give them equal amounts of money. He gives them money based on their talents, their ability to handle money, presumably. And then he takes off for a period of time, and he comes back. And he says, well, what did you guys do with the money? And one servant says, I took it and I invested it. You gave me a lot of money, and I went and I invested it and I doubled it. And he goes, oh, it's amazing. Thank you. And another servant who didn't get quite as much money went out and he did something similar. And he gave him back more money than what he had received. And so obviously this landowner was very happy. Well, then the servant who received the least amount of money, because he was the least talented, he didn't want to lose it. So he buried it in the ground. He dug it up and he handed him back the exact money that he handed over to him. And the landowner scolded him for not using his gifts. And I think that a lot of times we compare ourselves physically. It might be health, it might be the way we look, it might be the way we perform athletically. And we compare ourselves to other people and we go, oh, I didn't get as many gifts as that person. And because of that, a lot of people they don't look at what they have and think about maximizing it. And I think that's a shame. And I try not to judge people, but as a healthcare provider, this is just something I think about all the time. And, I will see people who are very religious. I would assume that they have a great relationship with God, but they don't take care of their bodies. And if you think about the human body as a gift from God, he may not have given you Michael Phelps's body. He may not, you may not ever be a model or an elite athlete, or, you may be crippled. You may have disabilities. You may have a lot of different things, but there's still a gift there. And where I am right now, I feel like we should do the best we can to maximize that gift. And I think anyone, I know where the criticism's about to come, because you could think about, we could think of extremes. Like, think about Mother Teresa. Think of any saint that you can think of. I'm assuming that Mother Teresa did not have an impressive VO2 max or bench press. But I think people like that are outliers to a certain extent, because there was obviously a greater calling. And I think a lot of times, this is my observation working with people just in general. It doesn't necessarily have to do with health. It could be pain management. This is my observation of human nature. There are excuses, and then there are reasons. There are legitimate reasons to not do something or to not take care of yourself. And then there are excuses. The problem that we get into is when we start lying to ourselves and telling ourselves that these excuses are actually legitimate reasons. And as soon as you start lying to yourself and believing that lie, 20 years goes by and you haven't exercised, or you haven't been taking care of your body, or you've been eating whatever you want, and now you have diabetes. And it's a shame. And so I'm not here to judge people, but I would say, if you're listening to this and I'm striking a nerve, think about it. Is it because you're lying to yourself? And that's okay. We all do it. Maybe not, I do it, maybe not in this realm, but it's human nature. And I think part of what I do, at least the reason why Build Beyond Health and this podcast, Build Beyond Podcast, exists, is to challenge and guide people, because I want people to reach their full potential. And so full potential is maximizing health and ability and maximizing your body while you're here on earth. And then ideally, full potential would be going to heaven. Build Beyond Health doesn't really help with that. But maybe this podcast or these discussions can help with that. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm trying to challenge people and guide them. And part of challenging people is saying things that are hard to hear. And part of challenging yourself is thinking about those things. So you got to think about in your life, if there are things that you don't like your health, you don't like your pain levels, you don't like your physical fitness, have you been telling yourself excuses and then lying to yourself and saying those excuses are legitimate reasons? And only you can answer that. I can't answer that. My job is to help people, once they realize that, help them find ways to make things happen. I'm the guide. Sometimes I just have to challenge people to look in the mirror and realize that, hey, I've got to make a change. So I don't know. When I talked to Aaron about this on the other podcast, we got into how we would define spiritual health, and he said something that I did not expect, but I've thought about a lot since. He said spiritual health is joy. Now, if you think about that, there are a lot of people out there who are very joyful, but they don't have great spiritual health. So it's not like a cause and effect thing. But Do you know anyone who is spiritually healthy and right with God and has a great relationship with God who is not joyful? You don't. Because part of having that relationship with God is knowing that the light at the end of the tunnel is salvation. And knowing that you have someone or something that the best that my brain can comprehend is like a step parent who, for no reason other than just love, wants to see me succeed. And so, regardless of what's happening in your life, if you have that relationship and you are spiritually healthy, you can find joy. There's a great story. I have no idea if this is true. I think it was some Protestant minister. I hope I'm saying that right. I can't remember his name. He's very popular. He's really good on good social media. And he told this story. Again, I don't know if this was true, but some Christians get taken, this is during World War II, to a concentration camp. A lot of their family dies. It's two sisters, and they start a Bible study, and that's not allowed in the camps. And part of this Bible study and preparing for it is being grateful. And so the one sister who has a better relationship with God than the other is saying, we've got to be grateful. We've got to be thankful. And she says, the sister looks at her and says, what are you talking about? This is crazy. We're in a concentration camp. We're probably going to die. We're not going to die an easy death. This is terrible. And she said, well, we got to find a way to be grateful. So let's be grateful for the fact that it's snowing outside and we have a roof over our head. And let's be grateful for the fact that they did feed us today and that we're technically not freezing. And we have guards outside, although they're, not our guards. We are in this moment safe. And so one sister said, okay, I can be grateful for those things, but there's one thing I can't be grateful. It's the fleas. And apparently the barracks that they were in was infested with fleas. And she said, no, we have to be grateful for everything. And then one sister says, come on, I can't be grateful for the fleas. This is terrible. She said, no, grateful for everything. Complete gratitude, complete joy. So this goes on, and they have this Bible study. But the interesting thing is that the guards never come in and break up the Bible study over the years that they're there. And they have to know this is going on. And they never come in. So years later, or months later, the camp gets liberated. I think one sister dies. And then the one that's left, as they're, leaving the camp, the guards are in custody, and she walks up to him and asks him, for all this time, you had to know that we were doing a Bible study, didn't you? And the guard said, yes, we knew. And she said, well, why didn't you come in and break it up? And he said, because of the fleas. So, I don't know if that's true, but God works in mysterious ways. And if you think about any saint, to be a saint, those lives are hard. It's not a life that most people could take. And yet they find joy in just absolute agony. And I think, so I reflect on Aaron's definition of spiritual health, and it's to be right with God and to have that relationship and to be truly healthy in that bond is pure joy. And I like that because there's a sense of gratitude there. And I don't know if that's a good enough complete definition of spiritual health, but it's enough for me right now. So if you think about, we have spiritual health on this side. In my right hand, I'm holding spiritual health. So I have a relationship with God. I am eternally grateful, and I can find joy in any situation because of that relationship and because of that love. Okay, so that's spiritual health. And then physical health on the other side, let's say the ability to adapt and to self-manage. So you can have multiple comorbidities and multiple issues, but you You get sick, you recover. You break a bone, you recover. You keep moving. So you've got that. And we can even set numerical markers. Maybe my blood pressure is good and my pulse is good and my BMI is great. And so I checked all those boxes. Well, okay, so I've got physical health and I have spiritual health. And then that maybe that makes me as a being, as a person, a healthy, someone who is healthy. And then there's obviously, these are not static targets, right? They're not static settings. It's not like you attain a relationship with anyone or anything and then it just stays the same. You have to work at that. So throughout time, my relationship with God is going to change. It'll get worse, it'll get better, it'll fluctuate because I'm human. And the same thing, my health will change, especially as I age. But at the baseline, although all those numbers are going to change, my baseline, what I'm trying to do is maintain that ability to adapt and to self-manage. So I feel like regardless of how my numbers shift and how many injuries I get and what goes on in my life, if I can maintain that ability to adapt and to self-manage physically, and then I can maintain that joy and that relationship with God, then maybe I'm a healthy person, spiritually and physically. Maybe. I don't know. I want to bring on, I have some other people in mind, other religious leaders outside of Catholicism. I'm biased because I'm Catholic, but I want to talk to some other people. So I know some other people that I haven't asked yet, but if you're listening to this and you know me and you're a religious leader, you're probably on my list. If you're not, reach out to me, or you want to be on my list. I just got to find the right timing, because I have to find the right timing, not just schedule wise, but the right timing emotionally, because I, to be honest, was not super prepared for the last one. I mean, I was prepared in the fact that I had questions and schedule wise, like logistically very prepared. I was just not prepared to cry and get emotional. So I don't know. I'm willing to do that again too. It's not something I look forward to necessarily, but I want to learn. I learned a lot on the last one, so I want to do that again. Today, for this podcast, I have a really cool YouTube video that I stumbled on yesterday, and I was like, oh man, I got to do an episode on this. So I'm actually going to play it. I don't know how long it is. It's not very long. I'm going to play it, and I'll stop it periodically because I think this is important.
Wait a second. This is Essential Presents. I didn't come here for fitness advice. I came here for my soul. We are body and soul together. Like, the human being is not just a soul trapped in a body. What we are is embodied souls, or we're ensouled bodies. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Essential Presents. I'm sure at some point we've all heard these words, or we've uttered these words. Why can't you just take care of your stuff? Me or my siblings would leave our bikes out on the lawn or something, and they get rained on. And my dad would be like, what the heck? Why can't you take care of your stuff? We'd leave the basketball in the driveway. You're playing basketball and again, leave it out in the weather. My mom would come out like, what's the point of us giving you this thing if you're not going to take care of it? That's something so essential for us as Christians. Why would the Lord give us something if we're not going to take care of it? I came across some statistics recently that roughly 3 out of 4 Americans are either overweight or obese. Less than 25% of Americans actually are physically fit. These numbers have doubled, or these stats have doubled since 1990. So in the span of one generation, we've had this massive shift of some sort. And now, wait, I don't want to hear this. I don't need to hear this. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't need to. But I think it's important. You are your body and your soul. And so because of that, right, we know that it actually matters. God gave us a soul. He gave us a body. God could say the same thing about our soul. If we're driving it off a cliff, he could say, why should I give you this thing if you're not going to take care of it? The same thing is true when it comes to our body. Our bodies are as much a gift from God as our souls are. So God could look at us and say, why would I give you this gift if you're not going to take care of it? We could fall into one of two traps, because these are the traps that humanity has fallen into over the course of all time. One trap is the body's nothing. The other trap is the body's everything. And we have to avoid these, because that's not the Catholic view. The Catholic view is not the body's nothing. Also, it's not the body's everything. So the view that the body's nothing, an example of that would be Gnosticism or Manichaeism, right? Would say that no, we're just the body's just the shell for the soul. or the body is the cage that the soul dwells in. You also would say, like, Hinduism would be something similar, right? Your body gets replaced. You have this kind of karmic cycle. We have reincarnation. Your body isn't you in those cases. Your body is simply, again, it's just the vehicle. It's the car that your soul is driving. That'd be Gnosticism, that kind of idea. That would denigrate the reality of the body. It would say the body doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter at all. All that matters is the unseen part of you. That's the true you. And we see that right now, right? We have certain ideologies going around in our culture right now that deny the reality that, no, your body, that's you. Your soul is yours. Your body is yours. What a person is a body and soul composite, right? The first extreme says the body's nothing. Doesn't even matter at all. The other extreme says the body's everything. John Paul II talked about this. In fact, he called it the cult of the body, because he was actually warning directly against this vision that would see the body as nothing, that would see it just as the shell. But he said we can't fall into the trap of the cult of the body. Cult of the body does what? If the Gnosticism kind of idea would say that I can dismiss, break, be inattentive to the body. The cult of the body says the body's everything. I compare my body to everyone else's body. My body has to look a certain way, has to work and look a certain way. It has to be a certain way. And people can sacrifice their entire lives for just this one particular gift. The voice that's really loud that says your body really isn't you is very, very powerful. But the voice in our culture that says your worth is determined by your body, that's also very loud in our culture. Because of both of these voices, you have people who are rejecting either voice. But when they reject either voice, they launch from one side to the other, right? So you might hear me talk about, like, you guys, we're killing ourselves through being overweight and obese and not moving. You might say, no, listen, the body doesn't matter at all, and go over to the Gnostic version. Or you see all these people going through this Gnosticism and say, listen, I'm going to go and perfect my body. We don't have to do either of those things. We want to affirm the goodness of the body. You are your body. It is good. And it's not good based off of how well it moves or how attractive it is. This is so important for us. Your worth and the worth of your soul, the worth of your body, is not based off of how good your body looks, how attractive it is, or how well it moves. Your worth is based off the fact that it is a gift given to you by the Lord. I will talk to people all the time who...
I just want to pause it right there. So now he's so much better at this than I am. You remember before when I said you have to think about lies that you're telling yourself. So I've got a group of people now who are on one side. They're telling themselves this lie that their body is everything. And then I've got another group of people who are saying the body's not important. And they're lying to themselves in that direction. So I think that's, as an individual, if we're trying to challenge you and guide you so that you can reach your full potential, if you fall into one of those traps, you have to think about it. And they can be, it can be so harsh if you think about people who get caught into this trap of thinking the body is everything. We've got people with eating disorders. We've got people with maybe drug addiction. We've got people who are addicted to maybe plastic surgery and changing their body. We have people who worship the body almost like a false idol. That's all they think about. And it distracts them. People with sex addictions, people with pornography addictions. There's so many, if we get too carried away with that, there's so many terrible things that can happen. And if we're thinking from a religious standpoint, you think, well, that's the devil, right? That's evil, tempting you to go to that camp. But going the opposite direction, if you go too far, I would say that there's temptation as well. Like if you're going to think about the idea that there is a God, and God represents pure goodness, the good. As far as our consciousness works and our brains work, then it's feasible that there is an ultimate evil that wants to distract you from that. So if that temptation can push you in that direction to worshiping the body, there's so many traps within that realm. But if it can't get you there, it can get you on the other side, thinking that it doesn't matter. So if you start to think that the body doesn't matter, then you'll destroy it. It doesn't mean anything. And it's a gift. So you think about, like, let's say you were a priest. Your job is to save souls. Well, what happens if you could be active? You have energy and health and physical health, and you could be active for an extra 5 to 10 years because you took care of your body. How much better could you make the world? Same thing with teachers or firefighters or cops or just anyone, any good person or someone trying to be good. If you took care of your body, you could have that positive influence longer. It's an interesting thing. So I as a Catholic, I come into contact with people periodically who don't like yoga. And I understand it's not just Catholics. From a Christian standpoint, there are a lot of people who are skeptical of yoga because of the traditional spiritual origins of it. I don't want to misquote anything, but I think it's safe to say there are certain people, a lot of Christians who are apprehensive, which is fine. You do you. Because they feel like, if you're going to go and open yourself up and go through these rituals, that you could open yourself up to something supernatural that it probably isn't good. The interesting thing is that yoga as a practice is quite healthy as far as the body goes. And people who are anti-yoga will say, well, you could do other things. You could do squats. You could do anything. And I totally agree. Yoga is not a requirement for health. There is a little bit of, I hesitate to say hypocrisy, but it's the only word I can think of that's appropriate. Because every time I've had this conversation, the person who is against yoga, I, as a healthcare provider, would know them to be physically unhealthy. Diabetics, people struggling with heart disease, obesity, things like that. So yoga in and of itself just the physical practice could be good for them, but they don't exercise and they don't take care of their bodies. I'm thinking of some specific people. But here's the interesting thing. So you say, well, I'm not going to go to yoga because I don't want to be influenced by maybe evil forces. Great. Don't do that. And then maybe you drive to the grocery store instead and you go buy, soda and cookies and things like that, and you develop diabetes. And I'm not saying this to judge people, but this is a platform where I can speak my mind and I can talk about these things. I just think that evil is real and that God is real, and that the influence of evil, if it can't get you to worship your body and go and get into sex addiction and pornography and all these other things, if evil can't tempt you in that direction, it's going to try and swing you and tempt you in the other direction. Well, don't do that. No, that's evil. But what do you think is influencing you to get diabetes, to live that lifestyle? You know what I mean? So that's the paradoxical thing about people who are very religious but are very physically unhealthy, because a lot of them will be skeptical of things like yoga. And again, I'm cool with that. You do you. I wouldn't want someone to do something that they don't feel comfortable with. But I don't think they ever think about what is that influence, that voice in your head that's pushing you towards diabetes. I just think it always brings me back to the movie The Usual Suspects. Not a religious movie, obviously. If you don't know what I'm talking about, great movie. But Kevin Spacey's character, Kaiser Sose, he says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. And so I think when I'm going back to Father Mike Spitz, I think I just said his name wrong, but he's talking about those two camps. You don't really want to be in either one, right? And I think that's it's important to think about where you fall, and what kind of influences might be leading you to your current location or keeping you in that location. Let's get back to this video.
Have this self-condemnation when it comes to their bodies. They can be healthy, they can be unhealthy. They can be classically beautiful, they can be classically unattractive. But there's this accusation they hold against themselves because of some kind of standard of beauty that they're not reaching. If it's not the cult of the body, and it's not the body means nothing, what is it? It's that the body is you. And the body is a gift that's been entrusted to you. And to the degree that I'm willing to take care of my body is the degree to which I honor the giver. Let's say that again. The degree to which I'm willing to care for my body, keep it healthy, feed it well, not poorly, keep it moving as best I can. The degree to which I care for my body is the degree to which I honor the giver of that gift, who is God himself. And conversely, the degree to which I am unwilling to care for this gift he's given to me is the degree to which I am choosing to dishonor the giver of the gift. This is so important. Again, same thing is true for our souls, right? Same thing is true for our intellects. If I'm not going to actually exercise my intellect to the degree that God gave it to me, I'm dishonoring the giver. By dishonoring the gift, I'm dishonoring the giver. If I don't exercise my intellect and choose to become wise, I'm dishonoring the giver. If I don't take care of my soul, I'm dishonoring the giver. And if I don't take care of my body, I'm dishonoring the giver. I know there's people who are listening to this or watching this who would say, well, I'm sick. I'm injured. And there's a bunch of things I can't do. I'm getting old and I can't actually move the way I used to be able to move. Like I hear you. 2 summers ago, I had back surgery. Last summer, I had shoulder surgery. There's a lot that I can't do right now that I wish I could do. But here's the trap we fall into. We sometimes think that just because I can't do everything, that means I can't do anything. Just because I can't run a marathon right now, I can't even stand up. Or maybe it is the case. Maybe I can't stand up. Okay. Well, what can I do? You might be listening to this and you're finding yourself in a place where it's like, no, actually, you're in the hospital. You might find yourself in a place where you actually are unable to use your legs, or maybe the majority of your body. Keep this in mind. Go back to the original point. You are still your body. Your body matters. Your body has worth, regardless of how attractive it is or how well functioning it is. Your body still has worth. That's still you, even if you're unable to move that body. Even if you can't, not only can you not deadlift 555 pounds, you also can't step out of your bed. Your body still has dignity. How do I honor the giver? You take care of it to whatever degree you can. You use it to whatever degree you can. And if we're standing between these two false visions of the body, of Gnosticism doesn't mean anything, or a cult of the body means everything, I think a really wise vision for the body is what St. Francis of Assisi had. St. Francis of Assisi, he wasn't a Gnostic, that's for sure. But he also wasn't stuck in the cult of the body, that's for sure as well. He called his body brother ass, like brother donkey. And he said, yeah, no, why? Because if I had a donkey, I'd take care of it. If I had a donkey, I would feed it well. If I had a donkey, I would use it. If I had a donkey and someone gave that to me, I would care for that donkey, use it well, feed it well. And in doing so, I'd honor the person who gave me that donkey. He didn't call it brother stallion, right? He didn't call it himself brother Adonis. He's brother ass. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to use it. I'm going to feed it well. I'm going to let it rest when it needs to rest. I'm going to put it to work when it's time to go to work. I'm going to take care of the gift. As often as we take care of the gift, we are honoring the giver of the gift. And conversely, once again, if I do not take care of the gift, I'm dishonoring the giver of the gift. So what's that mean? Well, it means body's not nothing. It's also not everything. It also means your worth is not dependent on how attractive or how well functioning your body is. Your worth is not dependent on that at all. But you have been given a gift. And maybe just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I can't do anything. You've been given a gift. Just use the gift. If you can, get outside and walk. If you can't, just try to stand up. If you can't, just praise God for the gift of the body that he's given you. Anyways, from all of us here to Ascension Presents, my name is Father Mike. God bless.
I think he summed that up nicely. Honor the giver by taking care of the gift. You need to take care of your body. And I think the question then, this is a personal question. Am I dishonoring the giver of the gift? Because you might be disabled. You might be elderly. You might have multiple health issues. You might not be able to do a lot of things. But just because you can't do some things doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. I think you just said that so beautifully. I wish I had his skills of, I don't know. I love listening to people like that because it speaks to you. I think there are a lot of times when people feel like they can't do things. And it's like, well, I can't do it perfectly. So it's like there's this, I don't know, this idea that something has to be perfect or it's not worth doing. And I think that's just something that prevents people from doing things for a long time. It's like, well, I'm not good at it, I shouldn't do it, or I don't know how to do it, so I shouldn't do it. And then decades go by and they haven't used their body, and they're in this position where they need help, and there's not a lot we can do for them. We can do some things, we can help in small ways, but it's similar to investing. If you when you're young, if you open up a 401k and you're putting money in regularly, and you keep doing it, you're going to have a greater return with a lot less risk and a lot less pain. But, if you start that in your early 20s and then in your early 30s, you stop paying into that 401k and all of a sudden you're in your 60s and you're like, oh man, I haven't put any money towards retirement. Well, you're going to feel that each month when you start investing again, for sure. It's going to be uncomfortable. So you're going to have to accept a higher risk tolerance. Then you're not going to get as much return. It's just the way it is, And there are a lot of people out there who try and honor the giver by taking care of the gift. And it doesn't work out. You get in car accidents, you get diseases. Just life isn't perfect. And that's okay. But I think what you should do, if you're looking for my opinion, and you're thinking, am I spiritually healthy? At this point, I would still say, are you a joyful person? Are you grateful? Ask those questions. Go that direction. Seek guidance in that realm. Are you physically healthy? Is your body able to adapt and to self-manage? If you don't know, maybe you need some help with that. And then if you're tying them together, am I honoring the giver by taking care of the gift? If the answer is no, or I don't know, you should look into that. All right, I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks for listening.